the best reps I've ever had know their sales numbers like the back of a baseball card. Mm-hmm. They know, okay, here's the pipeline that I need to have at any time because I'm going to close this percentage of my business every month or every quarter, and this many deals are going to fall off, and this is the way I grow pipeline. Like, they know every number like the back of Vince Coleman's baseball card.
Well, welcome back to the Trust Built podcast. I am your host, Alan Bennett. Today's guest, we have Justin Gallo with 360 Consulting. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, so just so y'all know, we've known each other for over a year.
About a year.
Was it September of last year when we first met? Justin's company, they do 360 Consulting, and we were in a business transition summit together. And if I remember right, I did a presentation on trust, and then you and Chris came in and did your presentation.
That's right.
Right. So that's where we first met. Since then, we've been networking together. We've been in different types of organizations together, and we find a lot of synergy in the type of work that we do. So even though we both do consulting work, we share a common client, but we don't compete with each other, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would like for you to do, just to get this thing started, is the sales story. Right?
Okay.
So give your sales story, and then I'm going to give them the background on what that's done for me, but I'd like for you to give your sales story.
Okay, great. So my sales story is, my name is Justin Gallo with 360 Consulting. Business owners work with me when they've got a slow or stagnant or stale sales process. And what makes me different is, unlike McKinsey or EY or some of these big consulting companies, I come in and actually do the work for you. And then we can build out a great sales organization.
It's that simple.
That's simple.
It's that simple. Yeah. So when that was a couple months ago or so. When was I say this is? So it was 2 months ago when we were in that mastermind group together, the Trusted Advisor group together, and you gave your presentation on what you do and the ways that you do it. And I always thought I knew what I did, and I always thought I did a good job of explaining. But I do a podcast, so obviously I like to talk. But I was way too wordy, and right?
Yeah, because you lose people. Like if you say too many words, you start to lose people, and so you got to keep it tight, and you've got to make sure that the person you're talking to understands exactly what you're saying. And so the way I frame it, or the way that you build a great sales story when you meet somebody, when you walk up and meet somebody for the first time, the way I do it is I break it into 3 sections. Your first is your value statement. Okay, what you are, who you work for, what makes you like what you are. Your second is your transition statement. So your transition statement, for what I just told you, business owners work with me when they've got a stale sales process. Okay, and then your third is what makes me different. My differentiator is I get in the weeds and I do it for you in your business. So that's what makes me different. So if you do it correctly, and you build that tight enough, then it will spur a bunch of different questions. And people come back and say, well, I'm a business owner. Would you be able to work with me? Or we've got a sales process, or we're looking at McKinsey or somebody else. And then it spurs all these conversations. If you get too wordy and try to impress them with how great you do, you're going to lose them.
Right,
like people just don't get it. They're not a nerd like you are when it comes to your business. And so you got to reel them in quick.
Do you find when you say that process, the story that you tell them, are the questions consistent as far as what they ask, or?
No, they're really not. But and sometimes somebody will say, you know what, my brother-in-law's got a business and he's been saying forever he can't keep sales reps. Or I know somebody at my church that keeps saying that they keep losing sales and they don't know why. And so sometimes it spurs conversations like that. It might not necessarily be the person you're talking to, but it kind of gets the conversation going, because people understand now that when it comes to sales, you could do sales training, you could do sales leadership, you can do a bunch of different stuff. But by framing it right, then they know exactly what you do.
When I heard you say yours, the one thing that stood out to me, I guess the way I listen was you said you get into the weeds with them on that. That was, to me, stood out. I'm like, whoa, what he means by that. So what does that mean?
So in the consulting world, I'm fairly new to it. I've only been around for 3 or 4 years of doing this thing. But one thing from my previous businesses I've had, when I would hire a consultant to come in, I pay them a bunch of money, and they come in and they write me a report on what I already know. And so when I built this practice, I thought, I'm going to do this differently to where I want to get in there and actually do it because I've done it before. And that's the way to really build a great consulting practice, in my opinion. And because they really see the value of it. One thing about sales is nothing happens in a business till something's sold. And so sales is the lifeblood of any business. And so any business owner knows that they have to get that right.
Yeah. Talking about hiring consultants, both of us are business owners previously. And we both have been doing this a short amount of time. So we've got this small business ownership history behind us. And I hired consultants twice in the past, and they did the exact same thing. They came in and they stayed at in my business, not necessarily in it, but they worked with me for 2.5 weeks, and it was like $30,000 worth of. And back then we didn't have flash drives. We didn't even have floppies at the time. It was a 3-ring binder full of all this stuff. Like, here's what you're supposed to do. Call us if you need us.
Yeah,
maybe. Right.
Yeah.
And I had to sort through, and I thought, I can't believe I paid these people $30,000. They gave me information, but I don't know how to apply it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so, and one thing I've learned about a lot of those practices too, consulting companies, is they kind of have a one-size-fits-all model. And so every business is going to be unique on what their issues are, especially when it comes to sales. And so when I get in there, I build it around them and make sure that it fits them.
Yeah. So for me, I had a meat marketing catering business, and they come in and they dump all this data on me, this financial data. And I had to get a grasp on my data. So they're right. I mean, everything they gave me was good data. Where I needed help was how to get people to do things, how to apply it, how to incorporate, how to get the people to impact the numbers.
That's right.
That was where I needed the help. I didn't need help and clarity of the numbers. I did, but that wasn't the magic.
That's right.
And is that similar to what you're talking
100%.
about? Yeah.
That is exactly right. Especially whenever it comes, lots of smaller companies don't know where to start. I'll give you a great example. A lot of companies have a CRM. It's important to have a great CRM in your system, but a lot of times smaller companies just get it what's out of the box. And so what's in a meat market is the same thing at a software company or the same at a construction company. Yeah. They don't know how to tweak it to make it fit their business. And so part of it, because I've done it so much, is, well, let's figure out what the right dashboard is that you want to look at. Like, how do we build this thing to make it fit right? And those are important with every company, right? That's what makes it go.
Yeah. All right. So I want to stay down this path, but let's pause for a second. All right. How did you go? How did this stage for you? How did you get into this? What drove you to go, you know what? I'm going to go and be a fractional sales VP.
Yeah. Well, I'm a sales nerd. I love it. Like, I've been selling since I was a little kid. I love it. I love the art of it. And so I started a company in my early 20s and built it up and then sold it to one of the guys on the show Shark Tank. And then after that, different companies would bring me in to rebuild their sales organization as a W-2 employee. But I learned that I really like having my own business. And so one thing I saw in companies is they might have a great idea, a great product, a great company, but they've got a really bad sales process. Like, they don't know how to sell their product. They don't know how to get it going. And so companies weren't able to hire me. They couldn't afford me to come in full time. And frankly, they didn't need me to come in full time and do it. Mm-hmm. And so the whole thought of a fractional vice president of sales is you need me for half a day or 1 day a week and let me build the foundation for what makes a great sales organization. And I go through and I do it for 5-6 months, get it right. And then they're good to go. Like it is a missing piece in most companies to have a really solid sales foundation. They might have their marketing buttoned up, their HR, their finances, but every company I talk to feels like they need help with their sales.
Yeah.
And so there's plenty of customers out there that need my help.
Yeah. I've had a conversation 3 times in the last month with, where's Carrie? I know Carrie's around here somewhere, but marketing people, right? There's a marketing person behind every tree. Mm-hmm. And they're great at getting the people to your front door. And then it seems to stop. It's getting them to walk in the door, stay there, and go out with some products and services going back out the door, right?
That's right.
So how do you marry marketing and sales, and how does that work?
Great question. And a lot of organizations have them almost in 2 different silos, but really you have to have them together. I've been in organizations before that have a great marketing motion where they can bring in a ton of leads, and they have really bad sales reps that don't know how to take the baton and run with it and take it to close. And then vice versa, you could have great sales reps that don't have enough leads coming in from marketing, and then they end up quitting. They go find another job where they can make some money, right?
Right.
And so you've got to have sales and marketing working together to try to work together on trying to have it right. And you just do that through building the right processes around it and just have both of those teams work together.
The people that I know that work in marketing, or the people that I know that work in sales, they tend to point fingers at each other, especially in the bigger organizations. Marketing's doing this, so they get this arm wrestling type of thing going on. Is that something that you get into?
A lot of times. I mean, usually it stems back from what I was just saying. There just aren't enough leads coming in, and somebody's on the chopping block, or they feel like they need to justify what they're doing. Usually in those situations, you just kind of work those things out. Usually there's some kind of metrics. If there's a sales rep's that's not selling as much, well, he or she needs to go find their own business, And so you just kind of work through those things.
Yeah. Let's talk about once the process is up. Let's say you've gone in, and is it a map or something? How do you, what is it is there something tangible that you give them to?
Yeah, great. So, like I said, I'm a huge sales nerd. And so from my experience, there are 4 major pillars for a great sales organization. And this is like, if you can get anything on this podcast, like this is the 4 major pillars of a good sales organization. The first one is building a great sales strategy. Okay. So sales strategy is, who's my ideal customer? What's the demographic, the geographic, what's the psychographic of who do I want to go after? Too many times companies say, I'm going to sell everything to everybody anywhere, right? And so they end up not selling anything. Yeah. You need to get laser focused on who your ideal customer is, okay? Second part of that is your value proposition. Like, what makes you great? Why do people buy from you? And really define that as a company of, this is why our customers keep buying from us, okay? And then the third part of that, and we mentioned it earlier, is your sales story, like the sales messaging. Like building those 3 pillars is the sales strategy that I work on. The second thing is the sales organization, okay? The people that are selling for you. What is their comp plan? From my experience, the thing that makes sales reps different than every other person in a business is sales reps want to make a bunch of money. And if you want to get good sales reps that say, I want to make a bunch of money and I'm going to figure out a way to do that. And you do that through building the correct comp plan. What behaviors do I want to drive to? What goals do I want to hit this year? And how can I back that into a comp plan? Okay. So the other part of that is building job descriptions, roles of what they have to do. I had a client a few years ago that everybody in their company was a customer service rep. They chased new business as an account executive. They were an account manager, and they were a project manager, all in one. Okay. And so what happened was they would just gravitate to being an account manager because that's the easiest thing to do. And so we'd go in and we were like, okay, you're this role, this is what your job description is. And we would hire for that type of person. Their business took off because now people understood what they did and you could really define it. Okay. So the sales organization is the second part. The third is your sales process. Okay. And they're all pretty important, but this one is really important. And this is the main thing I see in companies is they don't have a sales process. When a deal comes into the top of the funnel, like you just talked about with marketing, what happens? Like, how do you work it through? How do you start to predict your business to say, okay, how do I do discovery with customers? And once I do discovery, how do I get them into a negotiation stage? And then how do I close it out? Like building each of the steps in the sales process. That more than anything is so important to a business that you can start to predict what's going to happen. And I'll get into that maybe a little bit later with some other examples, but sales process is important. And then the fourth one is your sales execution. Okay. How do you take all of these things and you go get the goal that you want to hit? How do you build the key performance indicators, the KPIs around driving your business? How do you build the dashboards for the CRM to drive the behavior? How do you do great one-on-ones with sales reps and do proper sales meetings to really get something out of it? And then the final thing that we do through this whole process is we're building this sales playbook. And the sales playbook has everything that I just talked about all into a living document in the organization. And that living document says, when I hire a new sales rep, you hand them this and say, this is going to flatten the learning curve on how do you be successful. The way you are successful in our company is like this. Follow this path. And so we build that as we go. But those are the four columns, the sales process, sales organization, sales strategy, and then sales execution. That's the main part that I do whenever I work with clients.
You know, hearing all of that, I was listening, but it reminded me of a time in my past. So right out of college, for the first 10 years, I was a salesman for a chemical company. And I did okay. You know, I made enough to where I didn't get fired. But that was about it. I didn't really thrive in that environment. Once I started my own business, my sales thrived. And I think it was all around clarity. In the chemical business, we sold to pulp and paper mills. It wasn't something I got energized by, but it wasn't real clear to me as to how I solved their problems. Unless they identified the problem. I was struggling to uncover that. When I opened my own business, I got into catering. It's real clear. It's very clear as to what I'm doing and who my target was. And when I clarified what I was trying to sell and who I was selling it to, business took off. Happened to be my own business. And what you just described is that clarity around understanding and being very clear as to who we're after, why we're doing this, and what the expected outcome for them is.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because I bet if you look back on your business, when you didn't do that, the customers that were not your ideal customers are the ones that were your biggest pain customers. The ones that you dreaded getting the call from, that they didn't work out, that they were never going to refer you to another client for you to get more business. And you burn cycles on those guys when they knew they weren't a good fit. And so building that, I mean, you're obviously going to always have clients that fall out of that a little bit, but you tell your reps, this is who our ideal customer looks like, so that they know, these are the ones we want to go after. Because to your point, I mean, another extension of that I go through is say, okay, here's our ideal customer. Here's, we want them in, Northwest Arkansas, or we want them in Chicago only. Yeah. But you also define, who do we not want? Like, that is always a major point too, that you say, okay, I don't want to go after, companies that have a long RFP process, or I don't want to go after whatever it is, but defining that as well and having that documented. So when a new person comes in, they don't go chase RFPs.
Yeah.
Because that's not where they're going to make their money.
Yeah. I've had conversations a lot recently about the customer journey and the people understanding what their customer journey looks like. I've had that several conversations. And you're touching on that. You haven't used the words customer journey, but that's what you're describing. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's the customer journey is vital. And I think a lot of that goes with the sales process. I think you can train customers.
Yeah.
If you do it right. Like some of the best reps I've ever had, like their customers know exactly what to expect.
Yep.
And on top of that, having reps the autonomy to build that and do that on their own, it gives them the confidence also in their business, that they can do the right things and not have to, that they're going to mess up.
Yeah. When you go buy a car, let's say you buy a car, the expected outcome is I'm going to get a new car, truck, whatever it is so you understanding what the end looks like and what the payback is for the person that's purchased whatever it is they purchase, clarifying that on the front end is what you're describing as critical for that whole process, because if they can't see what the end result is, why move forward, right?
Yeah, that's right. And one way you do that the best reps I've ever had, the best reps I've ever seen, the way you do that is through the art of discovery. I'll give you an example. Like I bought a new pickup truck a couple months ago. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. So I go in to buy this truck and I didn't really know what I wanted, but I get in there and the sales rep started asking me just a few basic questions. And she kind of said, well, I mean, just like anybody who's buying a new vehicle, I want it really inexpensive and I want the nicest thing you've got, right? I mean, everybody thinks that. And so there's this gray area that you kind of got to work through with the rep. But afterwards, she did sell me this truck. She said, what should I have done better? And I said, you didn't do enough discovery. Like the art of discovery to learn, well, why do you want a truck? Why are you trading in this car for this type of truck? Because you didn't have a truck before. Like really find out why you were doing it. Because if she would have done that, I probably would have bought the nicest one. But she didn't dig into what the pain points were of why I was wanting that. And too many times reps, it's like fishing. They get that one little bite and then they immediately start reeling it in without really digging into try to figure out the why behind it. And if you can do that, that goes back to training your customers. You do that right, like customers are going to be yours forever. And they're going to tell everybody about how good of a company you've got because they really understand the why behind the purchase.
Yeah. It reminds me of a situation I had recently they were a client, but they weren't a client very long. And being vulnerable here, I didn't do the proper discovery. I thought I knew everything, but it was more just a mere curiosity on his part. He was curious and it's something that he wasn't familiar with. And he's like, I want to dig into this and see what's up. And I just took that first bite. He wants to do this. Yep. Here we go. And it didn't last.
Yep.
And looking back on it, that's what I failed to do was I didn't dig deep enough.
Yeah. Like you got to find out the why behind it because otherwise it's just a transaction. And, they're not going to be the ones that leave you a good Google review and they're not going to remember you in a year.
Right. Yeah.
But,
who was that guy?
Yeah. Who did I buy that from? I don't forget what that was. Yeah. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about transformation. So getting a sales team, whether it's 2 or 20 or however many it is, to get them to embrace a new concept, because if they're not doing it right, then that means they probably don't know what they don't know, right? So there's that learning process. What would be steps that you might take to help educate the team and leaders and the whole team, educating them on that learning process so that they become competent?
Yeah, great. One thing I've learned in a lot of small companies is there's still a lot of owner dependency on selling. The owner is the one that's been selling it forever. They've got the relationships, they want it all ran through them. They want to be on any call or any, everything has to be approved by the business owner. I try to get the business owner out of the sales seat as quick as I can. Okay, they still need, obviously they still need to be involved some with that, but I need them working on their business for other parts, because taking them out of it gives the rep incredible confidence that they can do the right thing. If they've constantly having to look over their shoulder to get approvals on stuff, then it slows down the sales cycle. It's the average sales price is always lower, and you don't have those customers that are going to be yours for life. That business owner that's been selling that forever to them, he has got the relationships because he plays golf with this guy, or because their wives go to church together, or whatever. This new sales rep's not going to have that, and so he's got to forge his own type of relationships and business connections. And they're going to be different than the business owner, but a business owner just needs to have the confidence that he trusts his sales reps to do the right thing.
Yeah, you bring up owner dependency, and that's where we have this common ground. Is you look at owner dependency from one lens, and I look at it from a business value lens, right? It kills deals when people are wanting to exit their business. And I'll give you a great example to complement what you just said. I had a discussion with a guy that wanted to buy a company. So he wasn't hiring me to sell his, he was hiring me to go in and look at, is this business worth what this guy says it's worth? And what we found was in the prospective company that he wanted to buy, he had great relationships, he had all kinds of sales going on, but they were all owner dependent, where that business owner had all the deals. Once you take that guy out, he sells his company, the new owner doesn't have those relationships.
That's exactly right.
And I talked him out of buying the business. This is dangerous. It's owner dependent. He goes away, so do the deals, right?
That's right. And one thing about when I sold my business, that was a major point. Is I didn't sell my business because we had a great product or anything like that. We had a great sales process, and so we had a predictable business for them to where they knew that what they would be able to get at it. Yep. That year, the next year, and 5 years, because we could prove it. And we have the processes down for them to do. And that's the main thing that you've got to do in a business, is make your business predictable. I'll give you an example. I've got a client that we just did this with. They had no idea what they were going to sell month to month. They would look at what they sold last year, but they had no idea what they would do for the current month. And so I built out a CRM for them. I wanted to see, well, what's your average sales price? We start building this for their reps. Okay, well, what's your close rate? How many days does it take for you to close a deal? All of these numbers come together. Well, then you just build a math equation to predict your business. So I knew that this rep, he closed 58% of the deals that would come into him through a lead, and his average sales price was $10,000. And so I could predict the month before, if he got 100 deals, he would close 58 of them. And the other rep, he would close 52% of his, and his sales cycle was 2 days shorter. And so then I could start predicting to say, next month, you're going to sell 110 items or whatever it was. Well, now it completely changes his business, because now he can start looking at to say, well, I better buy materials for this, or I better start, getting ready for this, because what's going to happen next. And then we'll start building it for the next quarter. And then for next year, we can start predicting those things as well. Like, that's game changing for a business when they can start doing that. And it gives the owner so much more confidence that they can look at their business, and then they can start really planning for the future.
Yeah, and especially since we've been discussing owner dependency, those owners that are like that the business depends on them, they don't have time to break it down like that.
That's right. And a lot of times they don't know how to do it.
Right.
Like, they don't know. They don't know what to look at. This current customer I was just talking about, they didn't have a CRM in place. I mean, they're writing stuff down or doing an Excel spreadsheet. Well, you just can't, it's hard to build a business that way. And you just got to have the data to really back into it.
Yeah.
And it's been great for their business.
Yeah. And predictability matters internally, but it also matters externally, right? So the client, if they're picking up new business, let's just take like a new restaurant, for instance. I'm just going to use that example. If they don't know how many people to expect to come, they don't buy enough food.
That's right.
And they show up and like, I want that big juicy ribeye I had last month. I want to know one of those. And they're like, we're out, Alan. I'm like, what?
That's right.
That's a big deal.
It really is. It really is. And it really helps shape the business by giving them a way because then you can start even projecting for the year, right? And that's the part I think that's so important to these guys. This company I'm talking about is more in construction business. So for them, they could buy materials and they could buy it in bulk because they know what to expect. It's a real game changer.
Yeah. A lot of business owners, as we both know, shy away. I'm not a data person, right?
Sure.
I don't want to do all that. I just want to, I want to make the pies, right?
Yeah,
I just want to do my thing. I don't want to have to worry about that. And so showing them what success looks like and how simple it is. So simple matters too.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll back into that with another story because that's what I do.
Oh, I love stories. Yes.
So when I was a kid, I grew up in a little town in East Arkansas called Evening Shade. And my dad had the grocery store in downtown Evening Shade. And every summer, the candy guy would bring us a box of Topps baseball cards the entire season. Okay. Or every player. And my brother and I, we would get these. This was Christmas for us. And we'd get this thing open and we'd lay them all out on the ground. And our favorite team was the Cardinals. This was in the mid-'80s. And so we'd lay out and we'd flip it over and we'd say, oh man, Vince Coleman stole this many bases or Ozzie Smith had this many doubles or, whatever. We'd go through all the players and we'd study the back of those cards and we'd eat breakfast and we would memorize those numbers on the back of their cards. Obsessed with it. In my career, as I've gotten older and I think about baseball cards, the best reps I've ever had know their sales numbers like the back of a baseball card. They know, okay, here's the pipeline that I need to have at any time because I'm going to close this percentage of my business every month or every quarter. And this many deals are going to fall off. And this is the way I grow pipeline. Like they know every number like the back of Vince Coleman's baseball card. And if you can do that with a business as well, like as a business owner, like that's whenever you really take the next step, in my opinion, as a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a roadmap.
Yeah.
It's a roadmap. It's taking not only where you've been, but also predicting where you're going. Right.
Yeah. And you start looking at it and say, okay, Vince Coleman stole 42 bases last year. Well, how many is he going to get this year? 44. Okay. So that means that he's going to get 48 next year, right? Or whatever it is. Right. You start looking at those type of metrics. And then you reward your best reps too for people that are improving those things, Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So when and let's kind of take a pause. I want to go into specific or individual reps, not necessarily naming names, but something that drives them, moves them to action. So this is my kind of world is, what are the motivators? What is it? Everybody's motivated differently. Money is one of them, but there's also things that are non-financial that move them to action. So in your experience with some of these better sales reps, besides money, what else do you see that motivates them?
Well, money is the biggest deal, right? I mean, there is a question I ask every sales rep through every interview that I do, and I've hired hundreds of sales reps, is I'll say, well, I got you into sales. And the question I'm looking for is, I got into sales because I can make the most money doing this, or I can control how much money I make, or whatever it is. Those are the type of guys that'll look at a comp plan and say, okay, I got to do this to make this,
Right.
That's the main thing. But the second part of that is a stable company that they have the autonomy to do, like be a sales guy.
Right.
If they've got somebody that's constantly breathing down their back or micromanaging, like, that to me, a lot of reps will shy away from, because every company needs good sales reps, every one of them. And every company's got good ones and every company's got bad ones. They need to figure out how to get more of the good ones. And a lot of that just comes from reps being able to have the ability to make their own decisions.
Yeah. So freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom. Latitude, flexibility.
Yeah. And they're going to mess up. Like reps are going to mess up and learn from it. But like from my experience, you just keep coaching them through that. Well, what did you, when they lose a deal, like if it's a big enough deal and you can see it really hurt them or hurt the business, you do an autopsy on the deal. Well, where did you lose this? And almost inevitably, you lose it in the discovery phase, like I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
You didn't dig into it to learn there was a competitor in there, or there really wasn't a big pressure or a big issue to buy it. Reps get happy years a lot of times, and they think every deal is going to close. A good sales manager or sales leader is constantly trying to pick it apart.
Yeah.
Is this a real deal or not?
So it's a form of triage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so you just go through and say, this is where I lost it. Here's what I'll do next time. I'll dig into this a little bit different. I'll tell you another story. Had a client a few years ago, and they brought me in because they were losing a ton of deals. Their winning percentage was really low. So we sat down with them and we went through every step of their sales process. And whatever these guys sold, the rep would build this scope of work that would take 6 or 7 hours to build this scope of work for them. And then in the next step, they would give them the scope of work and say, okay, it'll cost $100,000 to do this. Well, the customer would come back and say, well, I got $10,000 budgeted for this. So maybe I'll look at this next year or the year after. I'll put in the budget. So they were losing all of their deals in this one step after they would send out the scope. And so I went through and I said, well, why don't we do this? You might not know exactly what the price is, but it's going to be between $80,000 and $150,000 for this deal. So maybe in these early stages, you start screening it out by saying, yeah, just from what you're talking about, we're talking about maybe $80,000 to $150,000 to do something like this. Is that what you're thinking? And that simple question completely changed this company's business. Well, now the reps, if the customer comes back and says, no, I've only got 10,000, I've thought, well, then we need to scale this down of what you're thinking, or maybe we just aren't a good fit right now. Well, now this rep doesn't spend 6 or 7 hours building a scope of work. Now they've got all this extra time to work on customers that are their real customers, or prospect into customers that are willing to buy, completely change their business. And that's what it is. Like every time I get in one of these companies, it's always a different issue. But a lot of times it just takes fresh eyes to look at it a lot of times and figure out how to fix it. Because they've been doing this for 20 years this way.
Yeah. So you're talking about two things, I think. You're talking about a qualification process, qualifying the prospect is one thing you're talking about. But the other thing is you're educating, even the ones that go away because they're not a good fit, you're helping educate what you're looking for. So they say, oh, don't pick that phone up unless you got $50,000 and you get that, they don't answer the phone for less than $50,000, but you build that reputation, and somebody who's actually looking for that is going to go, who is that? That's who I need to talk to.
It goes back
not
to your
this
ideal
guy.
Customer.
Yeah.
It goes back to, these are the people that are going to buy from us. We want whatever Fortune 500 companies buying from us.
Right.
You can build it however you want, but every company's a little bit different. But one thing, you said something at the beginning of that too. Reps a lot of times don't want to bring money into the equation because they don't want, they want these people to keep talking to them. And I at least want to get a range out there pretty early of what it's going to be. So they're going to be a good fit for me. Like when I talk to people, like pretty early on, I'll say, and I go through what I'm talking about or what I'm going to do. I'll say, you haven't asked what the cost is of this. Like what's the, because I want to get that out there
Right.
and let them know that, this is what it's going to be to work with it. But a lot of times reps don't want to have that because they want somebody to keep talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. In my line of work, and I know you run into this too, when they say no, they need it. And whether they have the money or not is not the issue. They need it. It's the question I like to ask is, if you don't do this, what's that cost you? So, do you, is that part of your training process? Is that, I call it the rediscovery, is I know it's expensive and it may be out of your budget, but if you don't do this, what does that cost?
Yeah. It goes back to what we said earlier, right? Sales is makes everything go.
Yeah.
And so most people recognize that, that they need help around this. Like they don't know how to do it. Like I said, I'm a sales nerd. Like I eat this up. I love it. And it's rewarding too, because a lot of times what I'm doing, you see a pretty quick, they see a pretty quick return on investment, like the one I gave you earlier, when they move the scope of work out of it and now the rep's got an extra 6 or 7 hours, you see that in a pipeline that's growing, or you see real deals in your pipeline now. And so the sales manager's not chasing, trying to track down, deals that aren't ever going to happen.
Yeah, I know we're getting long on this podcast, but I got one more thing I want to ask, and this may take a minute, maybe not. The assessments that I do, one of the assessments is a sales insight assessment, and it goes through and it tells where their strengths and weaknesses are. And one of the things that I see fairly common is closing the deal. It's hard for some people, like really hard for some people. They can get the thing going, they get it all up in this momentum, and then, man, they just nosedive. What is that all about?
That's a good question, because I do see that in a lot of businesses. I had a rep a few years ago, one of the best reps I've ever had, but he could not close a deal. And it's so frustrating for a business leader or for a manager, but whenever you see this deal is at the 1 yard line, like ask for the deal. And I tell reps all the time, when you're going through the negotiation, ask them, like, when do you plan on buying this? Like, what's your timeline here? And not just timeline like, I plan to buy it in 2025. Like, I'm going to buy it by the end of the month. Well, now you've got a leverage point and you start pushing it and you have the assumptive close that everything is going to happen by the end of the month. But reps a lot of times, and I mentioned this, they don't ask for the deal. Like, they just don't ask for it for the rep. They're fine for it to keep kicking the can down the road. But a lot of times too, that goes back to the discovery process. Do I have the right person that can make the judgment on this deal? A lot of times reps might be talking to a lower level person in the business that whatever you're selling them might help them. But is that gonna, like, there's 3 chains ahead of that are gonna have to approve it. Well, is the rep talking to those 3 levels ahead of that to get it approved? Do they know who we are? And if not, then why? That's something I see with a lot of reps. They're not talking to the decision maker. They're talking to a champion in the company that they can buy from, but not the person that can make the decision. Yeah.
When I was in sales, it was, who is George? That was the thing, was who is George? And I don't know where George came from, but evidently George made all the calls, right? And so finding out who's George in an organization.
Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly right. Because reps a lot of times will just talk to the person that they can talk to.
Yeah.
They'll talk to their buddy if they can.
Well, speaking of closing the sale, this has been enlightening. It's been educational. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, man, this is good. I love doing it. I'm a nerd when it comes to this stuff, so I can talk about it all day.
Passion. I mean, that's the other thing that, that is a missing piece in a lot of places, is that passion about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, because, a lot of times I see too, I'll wrap it up with this, a lot of business owners, they're the sales manager a lot of times. Well, they don't know how to manage reps. They're going to manage it differently than somebody like me that comes in and knows what to look for and can press on the right things to try to get it. I want to get them out of that management seat and out of the sales seat and let them run their business.
Yeah. So how would, if they're still listening, How do they find you? Where would they go to find more about what you do?
Yeah. So our website is 360consultingdfw.com is our website. And then I'm Justin at 360consultingdfw.com. Either one of those, be glad to, I'll talk to anybody about sales. I'll give free advice on sales, of what I can do to help you. Because I think there's so much growth for companies with just a few little tweaks sometimes.
Yeah. So Justin and I both, the whats are free. The hows, that's different.
That's right.
We charge for hows.
That's right.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you.
Bet.